trying to pull out a big one just to show off. Whew! Look at the size of that parsnip. That's a nice one. Right next to it. Another one. Same category, right? Anyway, now I can get these all out. I'm going to pick them all today. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I thought I would talk today about keeping your beds from freezing when it's freezing. So let me back up. I've been away for a week. I was out of town, and I got a lot of stuff still in the ground, a lot of root vegetables, and I even got some greens still growing. And I'm not so worried about the greens for the most part, because they can take it. But the root veg, I was very concerned about them freezing in the ground and really not coming out. And yes, you can wait until spring and pull them out then, but I want them now, right? I got a lot of vegetables still in the ground, and I like to pick them and store them. And I like to just get them all out of the ground around this time of year and store them in cardboard boxes in my garage. They seem to keep just fine. And I know there's lots of people that say, I just cover them with hay and do that sort of thing. Yeah, you can do that too. I find it less convenient, and I've got a good place to store them in my garage. It's just the right temperature for storing root vegetables. It's like a root cellar this time of year. So it just works for me. It's so much easier to go down, just go downstairs and grab something out of a box when I need it during the dead of winter, as opposed to coming out to my garden, moving aside a big bale of hay, trying to figure out where I have carrots and where I don't have carrots, and remember where I dug last and all that sort of stuff. For me, it's just easier. Also, I've got a, what is it? Not a groundhog, but a gopher. It's a gopher. I keep calling it a groundhog. It's a gopher, and gopher is much smaller than a groundhog. I think I did a video before talking about it being a groundhog, and I got all these great advice about how to deal with groundhogs. But it's a gopher, kind of like a large squirrel, I guess. And I haven't sorted that thing out yet, but I have got consternation about leaving a bunch of really tasty root food in the ground when I got one of those things poking around, digging tunnels, and I've yet to sort that thing out. It's still, I'm still finding the odd mound in the garden, so it's still looking around, and it's starting to make mounds around my salsify and around my parsnips, so they got to come out. And I also got to find a solution to that gopher. And thanks for all the comments and suggestions people have given me, and I'll definitely follow some of them. Let's put it that way. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, it has been definitely below zero in the evenings and even during the day. Sometimes it's -6 Celsius right now, well below freezing. My walking paths, which are usually, they're all sand, they're usually a bit soft. They're kind of hard today. There's a lot of frost in the ground. I've checked around the different garden beds, and this one, most of them are mulched, so they're not frozen. But this one here is, the mulch is basically, I haven't remulched it. It's still got some greens growing in and stuff like that, and I just haven't gotten around to putting a winter mulch on this. So the top, I'd say the top 3 or 4 inches is frozen. So, if I'd left the carrots and the parsnips and that sort of thing uncovered, it would have been a problem getting them out. Now, I think later this week it's supposed to get up to almost 10 seam. We're supposed to get some rain. There's not going to be any sun, but it's conceivable the soil will thaw later this week, and I'll be able to run out in the rain and do that, I suppose. But what if it rains for 2 days and the soil gets super soaked, and then I get busy and I can't get out here, and it gets like, usually this time of year in the winter, we're not winter yet, but it's getting close to winter. The pattern here is if it's sunny, it's cold, and if it's foggy and overcast, it's warm. It seems to work out that way. So it's very possible that it could rain for a couple days. The soil could thaw out just fine, but for whatever reason, I'm not unable to get out here to harvest all the root veg. And then it freezes solid even harder because the soil is like super saturated with water. You never get those things out. So as I've said in many videos, I like to leave my root veg in for as long as possible. And I think I've reached the edge of what makes sense for leaving them out. I think I've gotten all the benefits I could possibly get from letting them get cold and the frost and that sort of stuff, which is improves the flavor. And now I'm just running the risk of them getting stuck in the ground. So it's time to take them out. So while I was away, and the whole point of this video was that I used my my plastic domes, which I had jammed off in the woods. I put them over the beds, almost all the beds except one where I've still got root vegetables to come out. So I thought I'd take you around and just show you the effect of that. So come along, let's have a look. So here's a parsnip bed. Got the plastic dome on. It's been like that all week. The ground out here is pretty stiff. I'm pretty sure I picked. What I did was before I went away, I picked all the parsnips that were around the edge. I harvested in about 6 inches from either side, and I harvested back, right, so that the outer edges, and basically so that this would be covering everything with parsnips in it. Yeah, let's pop this thing off and see how good a job it did at keeping the soil from freezing. So the outer edge here, there's definitely some frost in the soil, but in here it's nice and soft, and you know, the stems and the stalks have gone completely soft from just the time of year. That's what happens. Let's pop a root out here. Yeah, I like to use a stick sometimes to loosen the soil around. These ones are really big, so good lord, that's a huge one. There's two jammed right in next to each other. Oh, good God. It doesn't want to come out. Soil's loose, but I'm trying to pull out a big one just to show off. Whew! The size of that parsnip. That's a nice one. Like right next to it. Another one. Same category, right? Anyway, now I can get these all out. I'm going to pick them all today. Just give them a dust off. You know, I mean, I've mentioned this before, but people are always asking. I got other videos. I just pick these all. I let them dry a little bit on the floor of my garage. Then I just put them in a cardboard box. You know, cover it with a couple layers of newspaper. And they keep like that really, really well. I basically eat these well into March before I use them all up. And they seem to just taste better and better as they sit like that. Anyway, parsnips are ready to come out. I got my work cut out for me today to get these out of the ground. Let's have a look at some carrots. All right, so let's pop this one off here. Yeah. Alright, so you know, even with the dome, the dome on this one doesn't fit as tightly, so there is a bit of space. So even with the dome, you got a little bit of frost in the ground, but it's definitely, you know, not going to be a problem to get these carrots out there. Definitely coming out. No, you know, no problem getting the carrots out, right? So the dome's definitely saved Christmas, right? So to speak. So these will be no problem to get out today either. So that worked out really well. Over here I had a spot that doesn't really accept the dome properly. It's not designed to have one of these domes over it. But I got a lot of carrots still in the ground here. So all I did was sort of jam the dome against here and jammed into the fence and just put this shovel over it and put a rock on this end of the shovel and fish the end of the shovel through the mesh of my fence so this wouldn't blow away, and it seems to have worked. So anyway, I'll get that off and have a look. So this is facing, what you call that, southeast. This way here is southeast. That's where you are, south. This is facing southeast, so it's get really good morning sun. Anyway, let's see if we can pull these out. No problem, right? Big old slug on there. Get out of there. Anyway, this came out just fine. I'll probably pick all of these today. Ready to go. Over here I've got Swiss chard. And Swiss chard can take a bit of cold and take a bit of frost. But if they get too much, like these ones don't seem to be too bad. They can stand being frozen and thawed day in, day out if it's not too cold. But if it gets really cold, the leaves sort of almost become like a jelly. I think I might have some in another part of my garden. I can show you an example of that. So I mean, kale can take being frozen and thawed over and over again until the soil really freezes, but Swiss chard can't, in my experience. So it must just the way they deal with being frozen and thawed over and over again, or maybe they have a minimum temperature they can take. But I find kale I don't bother covering or protecting my kale. It doesn't seem to need it. Once the soil freezes completely, the kale will not keep outdoors indefinitely. I think what happens is that once the ground is frozen, maybe the kale leaves freeze and thaw every day, but those leaves can't get any water out of the ground because the ground's frozen. The roots just can't do what roots do, right? So you'll find over time, if you leave your kale out and the ground's frozen, that all the leaves on the kale just turn white, like they've been sun bleached. And that's because they can't, I don't know 100% sure, it's just my hypothesis, but they can't draw up water. They can't do photosynthesis. So the plant is basically growing in a drought in a sense, right? And it's getting bleached by the sun every day, getting cooked in the sun with no ability to deal with that. So you can leave your kale, as long as your soil is thawing out every other day, and if it's freezing and thawing every day and the soil is thawing out a bit, and where the roots are is thawed, kale should be all right. But this time of year for me, when it's below zero during the day and it's below zero at night, and you get the odd day it's above zero, and that sort of thing, it's over and above zero back and forth. I tend to try to finish off all the Swiss chard, and I don't worry so much about the kale. I just continue to harvest it until I notice it getting really cold. Then I harvest all the kale that's left and freeze and blanch, put it away. Anyway, let's have a look at this Swiss chard. Yeah, I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but this Swiss chard looks fine. I mean, I've harvested a lot of it. Before I went away, I harvested a ridiculous amount of this because I was worried about it. And I froze it and put it away. So that's why these don't look as big as they've been looking in previous videos. But yeah, it's still growing. And the soil is not frozen. So yeah, I think I'm going to keep these under the dome. I've never sort of tried this before, since there's so little to harvest anyway. Maybe I'll harvest some of the larger leaves. But keep the dome on and see how much more I can get out of this over the course of November, December, and so on. I'm not super optimistic based on the experiences I've had in my garden trying to get things to grow under cold frames and such in the winter, but why not give it a try? Even if it starts growing in the spring a bit early and I get something out of it at that point in time, it'd be worthwhile. Anyway, that's the Swiss chard. Over here I've got some of that stuff they call perpetual spinach, which is basically Swiss chard, just to show the difference. And you can see the effect the frost has had on it. So this is not going to come back. So this leaf, let me show you the difference. So here's a leaf that I would say has not been killed by the frost. It should come back today by the cold night. Not frost, just cold, but sub-zero, sub-freezing temperatures, right? And here's a leaf that is just, like I say, kind of liquefied. It almost looks like it was cooked, Looks like it was immersed in boiling water. You can still eat this, if you had to. It's still edible. But see how it's just the cell structure of the leaf is completely destroyed from the cold, right? None of my kale have this. It's just a Swiss chard thing. And yes, it's perpetual spinach Swiss chard, so maybe it's slightly different. Not as tough as something like giant Ford hook, but basically this will happen to all of the Swiss chard eventually, long before the kale starts to show signs of having too much cold. Just that, it's just, if I leave this out for a few more days, it'll almost become like a mush. It's done. Anyway, so that's just a walk around showing you what's going on with the root veg anyway. Definitely salvageable. The beds that were not covered are considerably more difficult to work with. So yeah, it's just a great way. The whole point was that I was going away for a week, and I was very concerned that when I got back, I wouldn't be able to get anything out of the ground. And so that's just one way. I mean, you could just put plastic over the ground too. Anything to let the light through, but keep the change the temperature of the ambient air next to the soil. There's lots of different ways. You could put windows over it, you could put, any sort of thing like that. But if you've got a stretch of ground, you can also cover it with a whole bunch of leaves and stuff like that as well. But then, there's pluses and minuses to that. If the whole point is to be able to get back at the ground and get at the soil, it can be, depending on what you're using, it can be difficult if you're covering with stuff. If you had bales of hay that you could just sort of set down like blocks and move them off and move them back on, that would work great. Yeah, I definitely don't want to have any of this stuff out here indefinitely, because I got the stupid gopher that's setting up shop in my garden, and I definitely got to deal with him sooner than later. Anyway, that's where we are with the garden. Root veg are fine. Another way to use domes, not just for getting things growing and not just for extending the season, but for postponing digging up your root veg, because it can be a bit of an overwhelming task to have to pick all your carrots and all your parsnips and do it all in one weekend. It's nice to be able to do it when you've got the right time to do it, when you feel like doing it, and when you're in the mood and that sort of thing. So just one more tip. I hope that was useful for you. If it was, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.